People think being cut out of a will is something that happens after death. A surprise, a letter, a lawyer in a suit sitting across a mahogany desk saying words you weren't prepared to hear. But mine was different. Mine came while he was still alive, breathing, smirking, buttoning the same cuffs he always wore when he wanted to feel important. He didn't wait for a lawyer. He didn't need a funeral. He just called me into his office like I was an employee who missed a deadline. I hadn't been in that room for over 2 years. It smelled like cedar polish and control. The same paintings on the wall, sailboats, war medals, men in oil portraits with unearned scowls. His desk, spotless. His liquor cart, untouched but ever present. And him. My father. Harold Landon. He sat like a king behind that desk, even though the kingdom was just a gated suburban home and 3 adult children too afraid to disappoint him. I stood across from him with my hands in my pockets, heart beating loud in my ears, not knowing what this was about. Only that it wasn't good. He gestured toward the leather chair. My father said, "Sit." I sat. He leaned back, elbows on the armrests, fingers steepled under his chin like some corporate villain in a B-grade movie. My father said, "Do you know why you're here?" I said, "No." "But I assume this isn't a lunch invite." He didn't smile. He opened a folder on his desk, pulled out a single page. His handwriting, bold and brutal. My father said, "This is my new will." I stared at it. Then I asked, "Okay, and?" He slid it across the desk toward me. My father said, "You're not in it." Just like that. 4 words, no build-up, no emotion, no apology. I blinked. I said, "You're kidding." He shook his head once. My father said, "I'm not." I looked down at the paper. I didn't touch it. Just skimmed the sections. Daniel gets the house. Emily gets the lake property and trust. The land and investments split evenly between them. Zoe? Not a line, not a mention, not even a damn photo. I sat up straighter. I said, "You're leaving me nothing?" He nodded. My father said, "Correct." I laughed, a single sharp breath, disbelief wrapped in a nervous exhale. I said, "And what? You wanted to see my reaction? You wanted to watch it land?" He didn't flinch. My father said, "I wanted you to hear it directly, no surprises." I asked, "Why?" He shrugged as if the question bored him. My father said, "You made choices. I'm making mine." I stared at him. I asked, "You think I deserve to be erased because I didn't go corporate? Because I didn't move back home and marry some banker?" He replied, "This isn't punishment. It's consequence." I felt the words like a slap, not loud, not violent, just deep and surgical. I stood up. I said, "You think I failed you?" He didn't argue. My father said, "You embarrassed me." My mouth went dry. I said, "Because I chose to write? Because I chose to live in a shoebox apartment in New York instead of playing golf at your country club?" He leaned forward. My father said, "Because you let yourself become unserious. Because while your siblings built lives I can respect, you played around with fantasies, screenplays, theater. You became a joke at dinner parties, Zoe. A cautionary tale." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I said, "So you're cutting me out to make a point?" He looked at me with ice in his eyes. My father said, "I'm cutting you out because I don't believe in rewarding failure." I let the silence hang. Then I asked, "Do you even know what I've been doing? What I've made, what I've survived?" He said nothing. So I answered myself. I said, "You don't. Because you stopped caring when I stopped fitting your frame." Still, he said nothing. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of my latest script. Bound, marked, not yet produced. I tossed it on the desk. I said, "That's mine. You'll see it one day, and when you do, I want you to remember this conversation." He didn't touch it. He didn't even look down. He said, "This conversation is over." I nodded. I said, "Yeah, it is." And I walked out. Down the hallway lined with pictures I wasn't in. Past the chandelier my mother once picked before she died. The one thing in that house that still had warmth. Out the front door. Into air that suddenly felt like freedom. I didn't cry. Not then. I got in my car and drove to the first gas station I could find. Sat in the parking lot with the windows down, engine off, heart pounding. I thought of the Christmases I spent alone. The voicemails unanswered. The birthdays skipped. Not because I didn't want to belong, but because I finally realized I didn't. He'd just made it official. I wasn't his heir. I wasn't his pride. I was just a daughter who disappointed him and didn't apologize for it. I sat there for a long time. Then I whispered to myself, "He's still alive, but he buried me anyway." And something inside me clicked. Not rage, not sorrow, something harder, sharper, resolve. I wasn't going to beg to be written back in. I was going to write something better. I wasn't the black sheep of the family. I was the joke, the example they used when they needed a warning. The eye roll in every story that ended with, "But she's always been a little different." From the moment I could speak in full sentences, I wanted to perform. I put on plays in the living room, skits at dinner. I'd memorize entire movie scenes and recite them for my stuffed animals like they were a packed theater. I was 7 when I told my father I wanted to be an actress. My father said, "So you want to wait tables?" I remember the way he said it. Not cruel, just amused. Like I'd said I wanted to be a unicorn. At 12, I wrote a 1-act play and begged my English teacher to let me stage it during lunch. My friends played the roles. I directed it like my life depended on it. That night, I came home flushed with pride and told my family about it over meatloaf and green beans. My brother Daniel said, "Was it about elves again?" My sister Emily added, "Did someone die dramatically in the end, like always?" My father didn't even look up from his plate. My father said, "Try focusing on your math scores instead. Drama won't pay the mortgage." When I brought home my first acting trophy from a local youth competition, they left it in the kitchen for a week before it disappeared. I later found it behind the garage paint cans. By the time I was 16, I'd stopped trying to impress them. I spent my evenings at the community theater downtown, helping with costumes, shadowing the stage manager, sweeping confetti off the stage after closing night. That was where I felt real. That was where people didn't flinch when I cried, didn't call me too much when I laughed too loud. Where I could be anyone and finally feel like myself. But back home, I was still the disappointment. Emily was in a pre-law program before she could legally vote. Daniel had a business degree framed before I'd even taken my SATs. I graduated high school with a messy portfolio of poems, monologues, and rejection letters from every casting call I could find. I didn't go to college. I didn't want the debt or the lectures. I moved to New York with a duffel bag, $600 in saved babysitting money, and a dream that felt too big for the bus I rode in on. That first year, I slept on friends' floors, worked part-time in bookstores and cafes, auditioned during lunch breaks, took rejection like vitamins. And every holiday I went home. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Hope. But each visit was a masterclass in humiliation. One Christmas after I'd landed a speaking role in an off-Broadway production, not glamorous but real, I told my father about it over coffee in the kitchen. I said, "I have 7 lines, and a name in the program." He raised an eyebrow and asked, "How much does it pay?" I said, $200 for the week. He nodded like he'd confirmed something. My father said, "You could make that in a single night bartending." Emily walked in and asked, "Still doing that play thing?" I said, "It's a job." She replied, "If it's a job, where's your paycheck stub?" I smiled, bitter. I said, "Do you make your surgeon friends show you theirs?" She laughed and said, "They don't have to." Every family gathering felt like a performance, but not the kind I wanted. It was all about status, who bought a house, who got promoted, who had a new fiancé, a new SUV, a new dog trained in German. When it was my turn, the conversation always pivoted. Daniel once asked, "You still doing that thing where you pretend to be someone else?" I said, "It's called acting." He shrugged and said, "Right. Sure. Just don't quit your day job." "Oh wait, do you have one right now?" They laughed. My father didn't stop them. He never did. Instead, he'd pour another glass of wine and say something like, "My father said, not everyone needs to be a star. Some people are just colorful side characters." And I knew he meant me. It didn't matter what I achieved, not to them. The day I landed a commercial spot, a real one, with a national brand, I sent them the link. I thought, maybe this one will count. No one replied. 3 days later, my mother's old friend Susan called and said, "You were fantastic. You looked like a real actress." I said, "Thank you. I am one." She said, "Oh, honey, I know. But you know what I mean." I always knew what they meant. It wasn't about effort. It wasn't about art. It was about money, prestige, headlines, something you could brag about at brunch, and I wasn't it. To them, I was a cute anecdote, a phase that never ended, the sister who chose struggle as if it were a lifestyle trend. They never said it outright, that I embarrassed them, but they didn't have to. It was in the eye rolls, the snickers, the way they introduced me to strangers. Emily once said, "This is Zoe. She's our artist/philosopher/ what are you working on now?" Daniel chimed in, "She's like a human Pinterest board." They thought it was funny. I laughed too, but only because it hurt less than explaining. I learned how to make myself small in rooms full of people who needed me to be invisible to feel bigger. I learned how to smile at backhanded compliments and sip wine through tears. I learned that love, in that house, was conditional. You earned it with achievements they understood. And if you didn't, you were tolerated. Decor. A reminder of what not to become. But I also learned something else. When no one believes in you, when they expect you to fail, every win is louder. Every door you kick down echoes more. And somewhere in the space between shame and resentment, I found the fire. It was small at first, but it was mine. And one day, it would burn bright enough that even they wouldn't be able to pretend they couldn't see it. There are moments when a door slams shut behind you and all you can hear is your own breathing. That's what it felt like when I left my father's office. I didn't just leave the house. I left the conversation, the expectation, the version of myself that still held out hope that he might someday understand me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in the car. I just drove, for hours, until the sun dipped beneath the trees and the highway signs stopped feeling familiar. I called Evan, a friend from a summer theater gig 3 years ago. I said, "Are you still in LA?" Evan said, "Yeah." "You okay?" I said, "Not even close. But I need a couch and a chance." He didn't hesitate. Evan said, "I've got both." 3 days later, I was in Los Angeles. No job, no agent, no apartment, just a duffel bag, 2 pairs of shoes, and the kind of hunger that comes from being cut out of your own bloodline. Evan lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with a futon that had more springs than cushion. But he gave it to me. He said, Stay as long as you need. But make sure you make it worth something. So I did. I applied to every job within a 10-block radius. I worked nights at a taco bar where the music was too loud and the tips were inconsistent. I watched scripts pile up on the corners of Evan's kitchen table. Printed sides, rejected headshots, emails from casting directors that started with, "We were impressed, but I didn't stop." I took free acting classes in the Valley, did background work on student films. I rehearsed monologues in alleyways behind food trucks and practiced dialects in the bathroom mirror between shifts. Every time I felt tired, I heard his voice. My father once said, "Acting's a game for the naive." So I played it like I had something to prove. The first real break came 6 months in. It was a no-budget web series shooting out of a garage in Burbank. A friend of a friend recommended me. I played a barista who gets dumped mid-shift and serves espresso through tears. 2 scenes, 5 lines. But it mattered. When I rapped, the director said, "You were more honest than half the people we auditioned." I said, "That's all I know how to be." They paid me $75 and a gift card to an organic smoothie place I couldn't afford otherwise. I used the gift card to buy a green juice and wrote 3 new monologues that night. From there, it snowballed. Not overnight. But slowly, steadily. Another web series. This time a bigger role, the best friend of the lead. Then a music video, a short film, a small commercial for a regional bank where I played a new homeowner. I didn't get the check until 2 months later, but when I did, I took a photo of it. I sent the photo to myself with the caption, "Unserious, huh?" I didn't send it to him. I didn't need to. The world got smaller in the best way. Every project brought new people. New hands passing along my name. Every audition I walked into, I left just a little bit more known. I got headshots taken by a photographer who said, "You've got something in your eyes. Like you've been through the worst, but you're still here." I said, "That's not acting." He laughed and said, "That's what makes it work." And it did start to work. I started booking roles that made people remember my name. People on set started calling me Zoe Ever, a shortened stage name I chose after someone mispronounced my last name at an audition. It stuck. I liked how it sounded. It felt like a clean slate, something that didn't come with expectations or old family ties. Just me, and what I could make of myself. One night, Evan and I sat on the rooftop of his building, passing a bottle of wine back and forth, watching planes land at LAX in the distance. Evan said, "You're different now." I asked, "How so?" Evan said, "You're not trying to be something anymore. You are something." I looked out at the blinking lights, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a fraud. I felt like I belonged. But I never forgot what sparked it. That conversation in my father's office, the paper he slid across the desk, the look in his eyes when he told me I wasn't worthy of legacy. He thought he was cutting me down. But he lit the match. He built the fire that made me impossible to ignore. I didn't want his money. I didn't want his apology. I wanted to become someone who didn't need to be in his will. Someone who wrote her own. And somewhere between the side gigs and the call sheets, I realized I was already doing that, word by word, scene by scene, turning rejection into a reel, shame into credits, silence into applause. It didn't come easy, but neither did I. Success doesn't arrive with trumpets. It creeps in quietly, through an email you almost delete or a phone call you nearly ignore. Mine came on a Tuesday. I was working a breakfast shift at the cafe 2 blocks from Evan's apartment, wearing a coffee-stained apron, when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. A message. Unknown number. The subject line read, "Urgent casting. Callback requested for lead role." At first, I thought it was a scam. Indie casting scams were everywhere. But the name at the bottom? I recognized it. Jordan K. Baez, an up-and-coming director known for raw, small-budget dramas that ended up at film festivals with long names and international acclaim. He'd seen my short film, the one we shot for $300 and a borrowed camera. Jordan's assistant wrote, "We were blown away by your performance. Jordan would like to offer you a screen test." Lead role. Working title, The Middle of Nowhere. I dropped my tray. 3 months later, I was in New Mexico, filming sunrises and heartbreak and the silence between scenes that says more than dialogue ever could. The script was brutal. A story about a woman trying to reclaim her identity after being erased by family and faith. The parallels were so close to home, I had to excuse myself during one of the read-throughs just to breathe. On set, Jordan walked up to me between takes. Jordan said, "You carry grief like it belongs to you." I said, "That's because it does." He nodded. Jordan said, "Good, let's use that." We filmed for 28 days. I slept 5 hours a night. My fingernails were always dirty, my emotions always raw. I gave everything to that role. Everything I'd buried. Every dinner table insult. Every unreturned call. Every time I made myself small just to survive. When it wrapped, I cried for a full hour in the rental car, alone, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was a lifeline. I didn't hear anything for 2 months. Then the trailer dropped. It hit a niche film blog first, then Twitter, then TikTok. People reposted clips, quoting lines I'd fought to deliver in one take because my voice kept cracking. A top comment on the trailer said, "Who is this Zoe Ever? Her face doesn't leave you." A week later, the film was selected for the Catalyst International Festival. It premiered on a Wednesday afternoon in a dark theater in Austin, Texas. I wore a thrifted black dress and sat in the back row. During the credits, no one clapped for the first 5 seconds because they were still trying to process what they'd just watched. Then they stood up. I was asked to do interviews, podcasts, panel talks about storytelling and trauma and feminine rage. And all of it, every line, every answer, I gave under the name Zoe Ever, the one I had chosen, the one he didn't give me. The film was eventually picked up by an international streaming service. A small banner appeared at the top of the homepage one Friday morning. Critics pick The Middle of Nowhere, now streaming. I sat at Evan's kitchen counter, staring at my own face on the screen. He walked in and nearly dropped his coffee. Evan said, "Holy hell, you're on the front page." I smiled. I said, "I know." Evan said, "Your dad has to see this." I said, "Let him." The first time I found out they had watched it, it came from someone I never expected. Mrs. Greenfield, an old neighbor from my childhood street. She messaged me on Instagram. Her message read, "Just watched The Middle of Nowhere. Stunning. Was halfway through before I realized it was you. Your father looked so proud, until he figured it out too." I sat still for 5 full minutes, letting that settle. He watched it. He watched me. But he didn't know it was me, until it was too late. I imagined the moment, the confusion in his eyes, the way his lips probably pursed when the credits rolled and saw the name, Zoe Ever. I imagined him rewinding scenes, watching them again, looking for traces of the daughter he cut out of his will. Was that my voice he recognized first? Was it the way I clenched my jaw when the character screamed? Was it my eyes, wide and daring? The same eyes he once said, look too emotional for someone trying to be taken seriously. Whatever it was, it hit. Because 2 days later, Daniel texted me. The message said, "Just watched your movie. Didn't know you were still doing that. Dad's been quiet since." I didn't reply. An hour later, Emily messaged me on Facebook for the first time in years. Emily wrote, That film, Zoe, it was incredible. I cried. Did Dad really cut you out of the will? I closed the app. I didn't need their compliments. Not now. Not like this. The irony was too sharp. They had sat in living rooms with glassware and throw pillows, watching the story of a woman abandoned by her family, and they hadn't even realized it was theirs. And when they did,
it was already done. Already celebrated. Already nominated. Too late to rewrite the story. Too late to claim me. Weeks later, I found an interview clip circulating online. A reporter asked Jordan, "What made you cast Zoe Ever in the lead?" Jordan answered, "She had this kind of wounded strength, like she'd been through something awful but refused to break in the way people expected. You can't fake that. No, you can't, but you can live it. And I had."
Every comment, every private message, every fan letter from girls named Melissa and Priya and Alina who said, "You told my story." They weren't just compliments, they were bricks. And I was building something with them. Something far more permanent than inheritance. Something with my name, the one I gave myself, carved into it. And he had to live with the knowledge that while he was still alive, his daughter had become unforgettable, without his approval, without his blessing, without even his last name. They always say fame changes people, but the truth is, it changes everyone else first. When The Middle of Nowhere went viral on streaming, when the interviews started piling up and the award nominations followed, I could feel the air shift, like I had entered a new orbit, and the people who once ignored me were now spinning around me. It started small, a feature in a culture magazine, then a podcast, then a late-night show appearance where the host introduced me as Zoe Ever, breakout star, haunting performer, one to watch. But none of that compared to the piece that broke everything open. It was a Sunday column, a long read in a national arts publication written by a journalist named Celia Grant who had done her homework. The article title? The Daughter He Left Behind, Zoe Ever's Rise from Estranged Heiress to Indie Icon. Inside, she detailed the truth. My real name, my background, my family. She quoted public records, pulled yearbook photos, interviewed someone from my high school theater club. She even contacted my siblings. I didn't authorize any of it. I didn't need to. The truth had always been waiting, like oil under pressure. When the story dropped, my phone exploded. Calls, emails, mentions. Everyone wanted a comment. They wanted a quote about the will, the estrangement, the poetic irony of it all. I ignored them. But I couldn't ignore what came next. Mrs. Greenfield, again, messaged me. She wrote, "Your father's been telling people you changed your name because you were ashamed of him." I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Pride like his doesn't die. It just mutates. He couldn't deny me anymore, so he rewrote the narrative. I got more confirmation a few days later when Evan forwarded me a video clip from a country club luncheon someone had secretly filmed. In the video, my father stood next to a group of old friends, martini in hand. One of them asked him, "Harold, that girl from that film, they say she's your daughter?" My father took a sip, adjusted his tie, and said, "She used to be. Now she's just a stranger with my last name." I paused the video and stared at the frame. His jaw was set, his posture firm. The same look he always had when he thought he was winning something. But this time, he wasn't. A week later, I got a letter. Handwritten, 1 page, no return address, but I recognized the slanted cursive. Inside, no greeting, no dear Zoe, no warmth, just this. "You proved me wrong. That's not an apology. It's a compliment. Use it wisely. HL. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. No, I'm proud of you. No, I'm sorry. No invitation to talk. Just 4 lines, like a challenge thrown at my feet. You proved me wrong. As if that were a trophy I should place on a shelf. As if all I ever wanted was for him to admit he had misjudged me. But I didn't need him to say it. I had already heard it from the silence. From the fact that he couldn't deny me anymore. Couldn't reduce me to a footnote. Couldn't scrub me from the story now that the whole world was quoting my lines and praising my eyes and asking, who raised her? That was the question people kept asking online. One tweet went viral. Whoever raised Zoe ever taught her how to survive fire barefoot. I need a memoir. I wanted to reply, no one raised me. I crawled out on my own, but I didn't post it. Not out of fear, out of freedom. I didn't need to explain myself, not to him, not to anyone. The industry knew me, the audience loved me, and my face, the one he once said was too expressive to be marketable, was on billboards in Times Square. But still. That letter sat on my table for 3 days. I didn't frame it, I didn't burn it. I folded it once and slid it into the back of a drawer, under old drafts of scripts I never finished and rejection letters that used to hurt. Let it rot there. Let it sit with all the other reminders of what I overcame. I told Evan about it. He asked, "So what are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing." He asked, "Aren't you tempted to call? To at least say something?" I said, "I already did." He looked confused, so I added, "Every word I ever put on film, every performance, every scene I bled for, that was my answer." He nodded, quiet. And I think he got it. The next week, I attended a gala. They were honoring women in film, trailblazers, survivors, visionaries. I wore black silk and red lipstick and walked through crowds of people who didn't know my story, but knew my name. When I stepped up to the podium to accept my award, I didn't thank my family. I thanked my silence. I said, "I want to thank the years of not being invited, the rooms I wasn't welcome in, the hands I had to learn not to hold, because they made this moment possible." The room clapped. I didn't cry. I didn't look up at the ceiling like I was searching for meaning in the chandelier. I just stood there, tall and still, because I had become the thing he feared most. Visible, unshakable, independent of his approval. I was no longer just a stranger with his last name. I was Zoe Ever. And the world finally knew it. The invitation came in a sleek black envelope. No gold trim, no frills, just embossed letters that read, "Voices of the Future, Annual Benefit for Emerging Artists. Location, the Langston Foundation Gala. Hosted by the Langston Foundation for Arts and Youth. Keynote speaker, confidential, the Langston Foundation." My father was one of their biggest donors. He'd served on the board for a decade. It was the only philanthropic thing he did that wasn't motivated by tax strategy or public image. I always suspected he liked the optics of supporting the arts, as long as it didn't include his own daughter. When I was 19, I applied for a Langston grant. I didn't get it. That same year, my sister Emily was invited to the gala as a guest of honor for her legal internship. I wasn't even told the event was happening. And now? They wanted me to speak. The foundation's letter said, "We'd be honored to feature Zoe Ever as our surprise keynote. Your story has inspired a generation of creators who feel unseen. Please keep your attendance confidential. Your reveal will be part of the night's final moment." I stared at the letter for a long time. I didn't ask who sent it. I didn't need to. They didn't want me because I was someone's daughter. They wanted me because I had become someone on my own. The night of the gala, the air was thick with perfume and approval. The kind of atmosphere where every compliment was also a calculation. The ballroom gleamed. I arrived through the back entrance, escorted by an assistant in a headset and black blazer. I wore a fitted navy suit, no jewelry, no flair. Just simplicity and silence. Backstage, I waited behind the curtain as the host introduced scholarship winners, grant recipients, and community partners. There was polite applause, a few heartfelt speeches. Then the host's voice rose just slightly. The host said, "Ladies and gentlemen, our final moment this evening is a tribute to those who rise not because they are chosen, but because they choose themselves. Please welcome our surprise keynote, Zoe Ever." Applause swelled. I stepped out into the light. It was a long walk to the center of the stage. I didn't rush it. I let the hush settle over the room. I let their eyes adjust to mine. That's when I saw him. Front row, right side. My father, black tuxedo, polished shoes. That same unreadable expression he always wore in rooms where he didn't expect to be challenged. Our eyes met, and something strange happened. He smiled, not big, not warm, just proud. Like a man recognizing a painting he once dismissed and now realized was worth a fortune. I didn't smile back. I stepped to the podium, I gripped the sides, and I breathed. Then I began. I said, "Good evening. My name is Zoe Ever, and I wasn't supposed to be here." A murmur moved through the room. I continued. Not because I lack talent, our work ethic, or love for my craft, but because I didn't come from a place that valued those things when they weren't convenient. People leaned in. I said, "I was told for most of my life that art was a fantasy. That passion was a liability. That dreams were something you entertained after you succeeded, not before. I was told that unless my art paid a mortgage, it wasn't real." I let that sink in. I believed them for a while. I tried to shrink. I tried to become smaller than my voice. I worked jobs that made me invisible just to keep chasing something I wasn't allowed to name in front of the people I loved. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. But I learned something along the way. Being unchosen is not the same as being unworthy. And being dismissed doesn't erase your value. It reveals theirs. I glanced, just once, toward the front row. My father was still smiling, but it had changed. It was tighter now, more uncertain. "Good." I said, "I am not here because someone pulled strings. I am not here because of family legacy. I am here because I refuse to disappear. I am here because I failed, publicly, painfully, and still stood up, again and again." I paused. "And I'm here to tell you, if you are someone who has ever been made to feel like your dream embarrasses the people who should love you most, you're not alone." A few people clapped. Others nodded. I leaned in slightly. "And if they're watching now," I said, "let them." Laughter broke in little bursts. Applause followed. I finished with, "I didn't come here to be validated. I came to say that when you build yourself from the ground up, no one can take that foundation away, not even the people who pretend they laid it." And I stepped back. The crowd rose. A standing ovation, slow, then thunderous. But I didn't look for his reaction. I had already seen it. Afterward, I skipped the after-party. I walked out the side door, where a car was waiting. But before I reached it, a familiar voice called out. My father said, "Zoe." I stopped, slowly turned. He stood under the amber light of the awning, hands clasped like he was holding something heavy he couldn't quite drop. My father said, "You were remarkable." I said, "I know." He hesitated, then stepped forward. My father said, "I wasn't expecting—" I cut him off. I said, "You were never expecting me. That's the point." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally spoke. My father said, "You're not hungry for my approval anymore, are you?" I looked at him, long and steady. I said, "I was, For a long time, but hunger fades when you learn to feed yourself. He nodded. My father said, "Well, I'm proud, for what it's worth." I took a breath, measured. I said, "It's worth exactly what you gave me." Nothing. Then I stepped into the car. As the door shut, I watched him standing there. A man who thought legacy was something you handed down, not something you built in the fire someone else lit. And for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not longing, just stillness. I wasn't hungry anymore. There are some truths you learn by force. One of mine was this: you can spend your whole life waiting for someone to open a door for you, or you can turn around and build one yourself. My father never opened a door for me. Not when I was 16, begging to audition for a conservatory program he called a scam for girls who don't want to grow up. Not when I was 22 and sent him a link to a short film I helped write, act, and edit, and he never even clicked it. Not even when I made headlines under the name Zoe Ever, and reporters started knocking on the past he tried to bury. He never opened the door. So I built my own, and once I walked through it, I never looked back. I don't think he ever truly understood what he gave me. He thought withholding love would teach me discipline. He thought cutting me out of the will would make me come crawling. He thought silence would turn into obedience. But it didn't. It turned into fire. I burned through rejection, bad scripts, empty bank accounts, and long nights on set with no heat and one take left to get it right. And on the other side of all that, I found something better than validation. I found freedom. People still ask me if I've made peace with my family. The question always comes wrapped in good intentions, like forgiveness is the final chapter we all need. But peace doesn't always look like a hug or a holiday dinner. Sometimes peace is a clean break, a boundary drawn in steel. A quiet understanding that you don't owe your story to the people who tried to erase it. I kept the letter he sent me, the one where he wrote, "You proved me wrong." That's not an apology, it's a compliment. I keep it folded in the back of my filing cabinet, tucked behind tax records and old award invites. Not because I cherish it, because I want to remember exactly how little some people are willing to give, even when they have everything. 2 years after the Langston Gala, I launched a mentorship fund for young women in the arts, especially the ones who've been told they're too loud, too sensitive, too unrealistic. I called it the Unchosen Fund. Because that's what we were. Not the favorite child, not the safe choice, not the neat legacy. Just girls with stories that didn't fit the mold. And yet, here we are. I've stopped measuring success in applause. It's not the panels or premieres or dresses that matter. It's the way my heart doesn't shrink anymore when I speak. It's the young actresses who send me voice memos saying, "I saw myself in you." It's the mother who hugged me after a talk and whispered, "You helped me understand my daughter. I'm going to try harder." That's legacy, not land deeds or jewelry, not bank accounts. Legacy is the mark your courage leaves on other people. The house my father left to Daniel, he sold it a year later. The investment portfolio lost half its value in a bad market crash. The heirlooms, Emily keeps them locked in a cabinet she never opens. And me? I bought a home in Laurel Canyon with a sunroom big enough to rehearse monologues in, barefoot, while the morning light pours across the floor. I keep fresh flowers in the kitchen. I write letters to myself when I'm scared, and I always sign them, "I believe in you." I don't keep family photos on the wall. Not because I'm bitter. Because I finally learned the difference between origin and identity. Origin is where you start. Identity is what you choose. There's a dress I keep in my closet, a deep red one I wore the night I gave my first acceptance speech. I didn't buy it for the brand or the camera flashes. I bought it because it reminded me of a girl I used to be. One who thought if she sparkled hard enough, maybe someone at the table would notice. I wore it anyway. But this time, I was the one hosting the dinner. One day, I got a call from a legal office I didn't recognize. The voice on the line said, "Ms. Ever, we just wanted to confirm your name was not listed in the updated estate documents of Harold Lane's." I smiled. I said, "That's correct." The voice hesitated. Then the woman asked, "Would you like a formal copy of the filing for your records?" I said, "No need." And I meant it. Because while he was still rewriting his paperwork, I was rewriting my life. Last month, I stood on a stage in front of a packed auditorium. I wasn't there as a guest. Or a surprise. I was the headline. The host read my bio aloud, then added, "Zoe Ever has become more than an actress. She's a symbol of what it means to reclaim your name, your power, and your path." I stepped up to the mic, took a breath, and I told the truth. I said, I was never the favorite. I was never the chosen one. I was never in the will. But I am the author of every chapter that came after. The audience clapped, and for the first time, I didn't hear it as noise. I heard it as proof. That I no longer needed his blessing. That I never needed a single cent. That I didn't have to wait for legacy. I became it. And I ended my speech with this. He cut me out of the will, but I made myself unforgettable anyway.